The space station hung above a dying star, its metal skin glowing red from the heat below. Inside that massive structure, silence filled the dark corridors, only broken by the sound of machines breathing, humming, watching. In one of the lower decks, a young alien girl sat inside a glass cell, her body weak, her eyes glowing faint blue in the darkness, chains wrapped around her wrists, glowing with strange energy. Every time she moved, the chains hissed, sending a soft current through her body. She had forgotten how long she had been there. She only remembered the cold, the fear, and the faces of her captors. Her name was Lyra. She belonged to a race once proud and peaceful. Her people were hunted, captured, and turned into experiments. The scientists called it Project Genesis. They wanted to create hybrid soldiers by using the DNA of her kind, breeding them for power. Lyra was one of the few survivors of her species. She sat quietly, staring at the star outside, praying that someone, anyone, would end her suffering. At the same time, far away in the station's maintenance tunnels, a human scavenger named Ethan Ward crawled through the dust and shadows. He was there to steal scrap metal and broken tech. He had no idea what this place really was. His ship was damaged, his supplies low, and he needed parts to survive. Ethan moved carefully, his boots making soft thuds on the steel floor. The air smelled of oil and ozone. He wore a cracked helmet with a dim visor, his eyes scanning for anything valuable. Suddenly, his motion tracker beeped. He froze. There was movement nearby, but not mechanical. It was soft, trembling, alive. He followed the faint sound down a dark hall until he found a large sealed door. A flickering panel beside it read, Bio Lab 04. His curiosity burned. He shouldn't open it. He knew that, but something inside him pushed him forward. He pressed a few buttons on his wrist pad. The door hissed open, and a wave of cold air escaped. Inside, the lights flickered weakly, and in the middle of the room, surrounded by tubes and glowing instruments, he saw her, the alien girl. She lifted her head slowly, her silver-white hair falling over her face. Her eyes met his, wide, frightened, and shining like the stars outside. For a moment, Ethan forgot how to breathe. He had seen many strange things in his travels, smugglers, pirates, even alien beasts, but never something like her. She was beautiful, fragile, and chained like a creature in a cage. He stepped closer, his heart pounding. Lyra whispered something, her voice weak and broken. Please, don't let them start again. Ethan blinked. Who are you? He asked softly, looking around at the strange devices connected to her cell. They will come soon, she said, her voice trembling. They want to use me, to make more like me. Please, help. Her words hit him harder than any weapon. He wasn't a hero, not even close. He was a scavenger, a man who ran from fights. But looking at her, at the terror in her eyes, something inside him changed. He stepped closer to the console, trying to understand the alien text. It showed a timer, glowing red. He didn't know what it meant, but instinct told him it wasn't good. The hum of machines grew louder, like the place was waking up. Hold on, Ethan whispered, his fingers flying across the keys. Sparks burst from the console. The lights flickered again. Alarms began to wail. He cursed under his breath. Guess we're doing this the hard way. He pulled a plasma cutter from his belt and pressed it against the cell lock. The heat melted through the metal. The smell of burning steel filled the air. Lyra covered her face as the glass cracked. A flash of light, and the chamber exploded open. Ethan grabbed her hand. Come on, we have to go. She stumbled but nodded. Her skin was warm, glowing faintly blue. The alarm screamed across the station, red lights flashing everywhere. Voices echoed from the hallways, mechanical and cold. Security breach detected. The intercom blared. Subject 09 compromised. Ethan dragged her through the smoke, ducking behind pipes and broken panels. The sound of footsteps and drones grew closer. He looked back and saw Lyra struggling to keep up, her strength fading. Don't stop, he said, his voice rough but steady. You're free now, understand? Free. Lyra looked at him with tears in her eyes. No one has ever said that to me before. Ethan smiled faintly beneath his cracked helmet. Then let's make it real. Behind them, the corridor exploded as guards burst through the doors. Energy blasts lit up the smoke. Ethan shielded Lyra with his body as they dove into another tunnel. The floor shook. Alarms screamed louder, and the chase had begun. He came for scrap, but found a soul crying for freedom. The alarms screamed through the corridors like the cry of a dying beast. Red lights flashed against the metallic walls, turning the narrow tunnels into rivers of fire. Ethan pulled Lyra close as they ran, her bare feet slipping on the steel floor. He didn't look back, because looking back meant death. Behind them, the sound of drones filled the air, their wings slicing through the smoke. They fired bursts of blue energy, melting holes into the walls. Ethan ducked, dragging Lyra into a maintenance shaft. The narrow tunnel was filled with wires and dripping coolant. The smell was sharp and metallic. Lyra's breathing was heavy, her glowing skin dimming. "They will find us," she whispered, her voice trembling like wind on glass. "Not if I can help it," Ethan said, tapping the side of his helmet. He opened a map on his cracked visor, lines of alien text blinking. "If we reach the lower hangar, we can steal a ship and get out of this hellhole." Lyra looked at him with wide eyes. You are human," she said softly. "I thought your kind were gone from this sector." "Not gone," Ethan said, forcing a small smile. "Just hiding where trouble doesn't find us." She tilted her head, her silver hair catching the dim light. "Then why did you come here? This place kills anyone who enters." Ethan paused, his hand gripping a steel ladder. He didn't know what to say. He came for scrap, for survival, not for heroics. But when he saw her chained like an animal, something deeper than logic took over. "Guess I'm bad at minding my own business," he said, trying to sound calm. Suddenly, the shaft trembled, and a loud clang echoed above them. The drones had found the entrance. Ethan cursed. He climbed down faster, pulling Lyra with him. Sparks rained from above as plasma shots tore through the tunnel. They dropped into a lower chamber, dark, cold, and silent. Rows of glass tanks stood against the walls, each one holding shapes floating in green liquid. Some looked half-human, some half-alien, twisted and lifeless. Lyra gasped, covering her mouth. These were my sisters," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They were all taken from our colony. I thought they died quickly, but they—" She couldn't finish, her tears glowing faintly as they fell. Ethan looked at the tanks, his fists tightening. He had seen cruelty before, but this was different, calculated, mechanical. He walked to a control panel and smashed it with his boot. The lights flickered. The liquid inside the tanks began to drain, releasing the cold smell of chemicals. Lyra touched one of the glass tubes gently. "You shouldn't have come here, human," she said softly. "They will hunt you now, like they hunted us." Ethan turned toward her, his expression firm. "Then they better be ready to bleed." For the first time, Lyra saw something in his eyes. Not fear, but fury mixed with resolve. Humans were strange, unpredictable, and dangerous when pushed. She felt a spark of hope in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. "Come on," Ethan said, grabbing a plasma rifle from a fallen guard. "We move before more of them show up." They slipped through another door and entered a long hallway filled with hanging pipes and flickering lights. Lyra's steps were slower now, her body weak from the experiments. Ethan noticed and lifted her arm over his shoulder, carrying part of her weight. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly, her voice almost lost in the sound of alarms. "Because no one helped us when we needed it," Ethan replied, "and I'm done running from that." Ahead, a door opened automatically, revealing a hangar bathed in blue light. Rows of ships rested on landing pads, and beyond them, a massive window showed the burning star outside. Ethan smiled beneath his helmet. "That's our way out," he said. But as they stepped inside, a deep mechanical voice filled the air. "Unauthorized presence detected. Human life form identified." From the shadows, a tall alien guard emerged, its armor black and shining, 6 red eyes glowing in the dark. In its hand was a spear of pure energy. Ethan raised his weapon. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice low and cold. The alien guard laughed, a deep echoing sound. "You think you can steal from the Dominion, human?" "Not stealing," Ethan said, "just returning what was never yours." The creature lunged, and the room exploded into chaos. Sparks, light, and fire filled the air. Ethan dodged the first strike and fired back. The plasma bolt hit the wall, melting metal. The alien swung again, sparks bursting from the ground. Lyra's eyes glowed brighter. She raised her trembling hand, and a pulse of blue energy burst from her palm. The alien was thrown back, crashing into a crate. The shockwave flickered through the hangar, shorting lights and alarms. Ethan turned in shock. What was that? Lyra shook her head, panting. I don't know. It happens when I'm scared. Ethan stared at her, realizing she wasn't just a victim. She was something powerful, something the Dominion feared. Outside the hangar window, more ships turned toward them, engines lighting up the void. Ethan glanced at her, his voice grim. Looks like we just started a war. Lyra met his eyes, a faint smile forming. Then let's finish what they began. And as the hangar doors opened to the star's burning light, the human and the alien girl ran toward their stolen ship, not knowing they had just changed the fate of a galaxy. The hangar trembled as alarms screamed louder than ever. Fire burst from broken panels, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. Ethan ran toward a small shuttle at the far end of the platform, pulling Lyra behind him. The alien guard they had blasted earlier began to rise again, smoke curling from its armor. Move! Ethan shouted, firing another plasma bolt. The beam hit a fuel line, and the explosion threw both of them forward. The blast wave shattered glass and tore apart machines. Ethan's ears rang, but he didn't stop. They stumbled into the shuttle. Ethan slammed the door shut and jumped into the pilot's seat. The controls were alien, covered in symbols he didn't understand, but years of scavenging had taught him one truth. All ships fly the same way when you're desperate. He hit random switches. The engines coughed, then roared to life. Outside, drones poured into the hangar like a swarm of metallic insects. Lyra sat beside him, clutching the seat. They won't let us go, she said, her voice trembling. They'll have to try. Ethan muttered, gripping the controls tight. The shuttle's engines flared blue, and the small craft shot forward, smashing through the closing hangar gate. For a moment, there was silence. The cold emptiness of space swallowed them. Stars glittered like shards of ice, and the red glow of the dying star bathed their ship in crimson light. Ethan exhaled shakily. We made it, he said. Lyra looked back at the burning station, her eyes reflecting the fire. You didn't have to do this, she whispered. You could have escaped alone. Ethan glanced at her. And leave you there? Not a chance. Her lips trembled. Why? You don't even know me. He gave a tired smile. Don't need to. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't need a reason. The silence between them was heavy but warm. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt something unfamiliar. Safety. She watched him, a human covered in scars, flying through danger without hesitation. Humans were supposed to be selfish, ruthless, but this one was different. Suddenly, the radar beeped. Ethan's smile vanished. Incoming, he said. On the screen, several red dots appeared. Fast-moving ships closing in. The Dominion wasn't done. Hold on, he yelled as he pushed the thrusters to full power. Laser fire streaked through the void. The shuttle spun sharply, dodging the blasts. One shot grazed the hull, shaking the ship. Lyra screamed as sparks showered from the ceiling. Can you use that energy thing again? Ethan shouted, steering hard to the left. I don't know how, she cried. It just happens when I'm scared. Then stay scared, he said with a grin. The Dominion interceptors grew closer, sleek black ships with glowing red cores. They fired again, and one beam hit the shuttle's wing. The ship spiraled, alarms blaring. Ethan slammed his hand on the control panel. Come on. Not now, he muttered. Through the chaos, Lyra closed her eyes and placed her hands on the dashboard. A soft blue light began to spread from her palms. The flickering system stabilized. The ship leveled, and the engines glowed brighter than before. What did you just do? Ethan asked in shock. I think I spoke to the machine, she said softly. It listens to me. Ethan stared at her. Remind me never to make you angry, he joked, trying to mask his amazement. They shot past the chasing ships, weaving between asteroids. The Dominion pilots fired again, but Lyra's glow spread through the ship like a shield. The energy blasts bent around them, scattering into the void. Finally, Ethan saw a massive asteroid belt ahead. We'll lose them in there, he said, diving into the rocky maze. The ship dodged debris and spinning stone chunks. The enemy ships hesitated, their sensors scrambled by the belt's magnetic field. After several tense minutes, the radar cleared. No more red dots, Only the soft hum of the ship and their heavy breathing. Ethan leaned back in his seat. That was close, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Lyra nodded weakly. You saved me again. He shook his head. You saved both of us. She looked at him curiously. Humans, your kind was known for war, for conquest. Why would you risk everything for someone like me? Ethan turned toward her, his expression serious now, because my kind was also known for mercy, and maybe it's time the galaxy remembers that. Lyra's glowing eyes softened. She smiled faintly. Then maybe the galaxy still has hope. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, the burning station now just a memory. But far behind them, on a Dominion command ship, a figure watched their escape through a holographic screen. Human, the commander hissed, its many eyes narrowing. You will not hide for long. It turned toward its officers. Place a bounty on his head, 10 million credits, dead or alive. As the Dominion fleet spread across the stars, Ethan and Lyra's stolen shuttle drifted into darkness, unaware that the universe had just branded them both as fugitives, hunted by empires and remembered by destiny. Their journey had only just begun. The stars drifted slowly past the window, their soft glow washing over the tiny stolen shuttle. Ethan sat in the pilot's seat, hands resting on the worn controls. His eyes were heavy, but he refused to sleep. Somewhere behind them, the Dominion was searching, scanning every system for their trail. Lyra sat near the back of the ship, wrapped in a thin blanket. Her silver hair shimmered in the dim blue lights. She watched Ethan quietly, wondering why a man like him risked his life for a creature like her. Humans were supposed to fear her kind, not protect them. How far until we're safe? She asked softly, her voice gentle but full of worry. Ethan sighed. Nowhere's safe. Not really, he said. But there's a moon on the edge of this sector. Mostly ruins. I used to hide there when things went bad. Lyra nodded, clutching her knees. I don't understand the Dominion, she whispered. Why do they want me so badly? Ethan turned slightly. You said you were part of a royal bloodline. Lyra looked down, her fingers trembling. I was born on Varelia, a world full of light and harmony. My mother ruled the houses of the East. When the Dominion invaded, they took her. They took everyone. I was a child when they found me. They wanted to use my DNA to control the rest of my people. My blood, it carries something they need. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Lyra hesitated, her glowing eyes meeting his. Our energy, she said. My kind can connect with life itself. We can heal, communicate, even merge with machines. That's why I could fix the shuttle. But in their hands, it becomes a weapon. Ethan leaned back, thinking, so they want to turn you into a machine that obeys. Yes, she whispered, a breeder of power, nothing more. For a while, silence filled the ship, only the hum of the engines breaking the air. Ethan glanced at her and said softly, You're not a weapon, you're alive. And as long as I'm here, no one touches you. Lyra smiled faintly. You speak like a soldier. I was, he said, his voice low. A long time ago, before I lost everything. The ship's scanner beeped, breaking the quiet. Ethan leaned forward. We're approaching the moon, he said. Through the window, a gray sphere appeared, covered in deep craters and scattered ruins. He guided the shuttle down, passing through thin clouds of dust. They landed inside a massive canyon filled with broken structures, rusted towers, and the remains of an old colony. The air shimmered faintly under the weak sunlight. Ethan stepped out first, his boots crunching on the sand. The place was silent except for the wind. Lyra followed, her blue skin glowing softly in the dim light. This world, it feels sad, she said, touching a broken pillar. Ethan nodded. Used to be a mining colony, abandoned after a war, perfect place to disappear. They found shelter inside an old command bunker. Ethan fixed a small generator, lighting up the dusty room. Lyra sat beside a broken console, tracing alien symbols on the wall. Do you ever regret helping me? She asked quietly. Ethan laughed softly. Every second, he said, then smiled. But I'd do it again anyway. Lyra looked at him, confused. Why? Because I've done a lot of bad things in my life, he said. Maybe this is my way of balancing it. Lyra reached out and touched his hand gently. You've already done more than anyone else ever did for me. Before Ethan could reply, the ground rumbled, the lights flickered. Outside, engines roared in the distance. Ethan's eyes widened. "They found us," he whispered. Lyra stood, her heart pounding. "How?" "They must have tracked the shuttle's signature," he said, grabbing his rifle. "Get behind me." Dust fell from the ceiling as ships descended outside, bright searchlights cutting through the canyon. Ethan peeked through a crack in the wall. Black figures dropped from the sky. Dominion hunters, their armor reflecting the pale sun. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Stay low," he said. He tossed a small explosive toward the door. It rolled across the floor, blinking red. When the hunters entered, the blast threw them back in a wave of fire and smoke. Ethan grabbed Lyra's arm. "We're moving," he shouted. They ran through the ruins as beams of energy tore through the ground behind them. Lyra's skin glowed again, her power flickering through the air. She reached out instinctively, and a crumbling wall shifted, blocking the path of their pursuers. Ethan glanced back, astonished. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." Lyra smiled faintly. "Then don't," she said, her voice trembling but strong. They reached the top of the ridge, the wind howling around them. Ethan pressed his communicator and called an old contact. "This is Ward. I need extraction now." Static crackled for a few seconds before a deep voice replied. "Ethan, you're supposed to be dead." "Yeah, I get that a lot," Ethan said. "Can you get me off this rock?" There was a pause, then the voice answered. "Depends on what you're bringing with you." Ethan looked at Lyra, her eyes full of trust and fear. "Something worth dying for," he said. Far above the ruined moon, Dominion ships began to close in again. The hunt was not over, not by far. And somewhere deep in the stars, the price on their heads had just doubled. The night on the ruined moon was silent. Only the faint hum of the broken generator echoed through the canyon. Ethan sat near the bunker's entrance, his rifle across his knees. His eyes stayed fixed on the sky, waiting for his contact, trusting that help would come before the Dominion found them again. Lyra rested against the wall, her silver hair glowing in the dim light. She was tired, but her gaze never left Ethan. There was something comforting about his calmness, something that made the fear fade. "You don't sleep," she said softly. "Not when people are hunting us," Ethan replied with a faint smile. "Besides, I've slept in worse places." Lyra tilted her head. "You talk like a man who's used to running." He chuckled quietly. "Maybe I am, but this time, I'm running towards something." She smiled at his words, a rare warmth in her heart. Before she could speak again, a distant rumble echoed through the canyon. Ethan stood instantly, eyes narrowing. A small ship descended from the clouds, its thrusters kicking up waves of dust. "That's him," Ethan said. "Stay close." The ship landed roughly on the cracked ground. A ramp extended, and a tall man stepped out, wearing a worn leather coat and a grin too confident for a war zone. "Ethan Ward," he called. "Still finding trouble wherever you go." Ethan lowered his rifle slightly. "Good to see you too, Cade." Cade laughed and walked closer. "You look worse than the last time I saw you." He stopped when his eyes fell on Lyra. "And who's this glowing angel?" Ethan's tone hardened. "She's under my protection. We need off this moon. Fast." Cade whistled softly. "You really know how to pick your company, pal." He looked at Lyra again, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "You do realize the Dominion's got half the sector looking for her, right?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "That's why I called you. You owe me one." Cade's grin faded slightly. "Right? I remember. That thing on Kyra Prime." He nodded. "All right. I'll help you. Get on board." Ethan motioned for Lyra to follow. She hesitated for a moment, sensing something cold in Cade's voice, but she trusted Ethan's judgment. They stepped onto the ship, the ramp closing behind them. Inside, the air was thick with oil and metal. Ethan helped Lyra sit near the cockpit while Cade flicked switches. "We'll be clear in a few minutes," he said, his tone casual. Too casual. Ethan didn't notice the small red light blinking on Cade's wrist communicator. As the engines roared to life, Lyra looked uneasy. "Something's wrong," she whispered. Ethan turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" Her voice trembled. "I can feel them." Before Ethan could react, the ship jolted violently. A sharp beeping sound filled the cockpit. Then a voice crackled through the comms. "Dominion command to Vessel 37. Target confirmed. proceed with capture. Ethan froze, his heart dropping. He turned toward Cade, who refused to meet his eyes. You didn't, Ethan whispered. Cade sighed. I'm sorry, Ethan. 10 million credits is too much to walk away from. Ethan's jaw clenched. You sold us out. It's not personal, Cade said softly. You know how this galaxy works. Ethan reached for his rifle, but Cade was faster, pulling a blaster and aiming it at him. Don't make me shoot you, old friend. Lyra stood, fear in her glowing eyes. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice trembling. Cade's gaze softened for a moment. Because I'm tired of being poor, he said, and your life is worth a fortune. Before he could say another word, the ship shuddered again as Dominion boarding claws latched onto the hull. The walls shook, and metal screamed. Ethan moved fast, tackling Cade to the ground. The gun went off, grazing Ethan's shoulder. He ignored the pain, punching Cade hard. Sparks burst from a console as the ship tilted sideways. Lyra stumbled, grabbing the edge of the seat. Ethan, she cried. Ethan wrestled Cade for the blaster. The ship spinning out of control, a red warning flashed across the display. Impact in 10 seconds. Ethan slammed his elbow into Cade's chest, grabbed the blaster, and fired. The shot hit the control panel, disabling the tractor beam. The Dominion ship outside wobbled, losing its grip. Hold on, Ethan shouted. He ran to Lyra and shielded her as the ship crashed through the atmosphere of a nearby desert planet. Fire streaked across the sky as metal tore apart. The crash was deafening. Sand and smoke filled the air. Ethan groaned, pain shooting through his body. He turned to look for Lyra, but she was gone. The ship's side had been ripped open. Her seat was empty. Only a faint trail of glowing blue footprints leading into the dunes. Ethan tried to stand, his body trembling. He looked back at Cade, who was barely conscious. Where did they take her? Ethan growled, grabbing his collar. Cade coughed blood. They planned this. She's theirs now. Ethan's eyes burned with rage. Not for long. He whispered. He dropped Cade and limped out of the wreckage, the desert wind whipping against his face. Far on the horizon, bright lights rose into the sky. Dominion transports, carrying Lyra away. Ethan stared at them, his hand tightening around his weapon. She saved me once, he murmured. Now it's my turn. The desert stretched endlessly, and the hunt for the stolen girl had begun again. But this time, humanity wasn't running. It was coming for war. The desert stretched forever, glowing orange beneath the twin suns. Ethan walked through the sand alone, his armor scorched, his body bruised, but his will unbroken. Each step left a trail of determination behind him. The Dominion had taken Lyra, but he would bring her back, no matter the cost. For 2 days he searched through the wreckage scattered across the dunes, following the faint blue trail she had left behind, until finally he reached the ruins of an ancient battlefield. Machines from forgotten wars buried half under sand and time. Massive mechanical giants lay in silence, their rusted frames glinting under the sunlight. Ethan stopped beside one, a colossal war mech with a shattered cockpit. Its armor was old human design, something built during the First Galactic War. He climbed inside, brushing away dust and sand. Inside, the controls were dead, wires torn, panels broken, but the structure was still strong. He whispered to himself, "You've been sleeping long enough, old friend." Hours passed as he worked, using scavenged power cells and spare wires. His hands bled, his body trembled, but he refused to stop. Finally, the mech systems flickered to life, dim lights glowing across the panels. Ethan grinned weakly. "That's it," he muttered. "Wake up." The massive machine let out a deep metallic groan. Its eyes lit bright blue. The ground shook as it rose, sand cascading down its armor like waves. Ethan strapped himself into the pilot's seat, the ancient machine responding like it remembered the touch of a human hand. Through the cracked windshield, he saw the Dominion's ship gliding low across the horizon, their transports leaving trails of dust behind. "Hang on, Lyra," he said quietly. "I'm coming." Inside the Dominion carrier, Lyra sat chained once again, energy cuffs around her wrists. The cold light of the ship burned her eyes. Scientists whispered around her, attaching wires to her arms. "The human is irrelevant now," one said. "Begin the extraction." Lyra's heart ached, but she refused to cry. She had felt Ethan's courage, his defiance, his voice still echoed in her memory. You're not a weapon, you're alive. The chamber door hissed open. Dominion guards stepped aside as the commander entered, tall, armored, and cold. Soon your power will serve the Dominion, he said, his voice like ice. And humanity will fade into memory. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes glowing faintly. You can't kill what you don't understand, she whispered. Outside, the ground began to shake. The Dominion officers froze, warning sirens blaring. On the horizon, a figure emerged, a giant of steel walking through the sandstorm. The mech's glowing eyes cut through the haze. Ethan's voice crackled through the old speakers, rough and filled with fury. You want to fight, he growled. You've got one. Missiles streaked from the mech's shoulders, slamming into the Dominion ship. Explosions tore across the hull. The entire desert lit up with fire. Inside, chaos erupted. Guards ran for weapons as Lyra's restraints flickered. The blast had cut power. She pulled at the cuffs, blue light bursting from her hands. The metal melted like ice. She was free. Ethan stomped closer, plasma bolts bouncing off the mech's armor. He aimed the massive cannon at the ship's engines and fired. The explosion sent a shockwave across the dunes. Through the smoke, Lyra stepped out onto the damaged deck. Her hair whipping in the hot wind. She saw the mech towering before her, and she smiled, whispering, You came back. Ethan's voice echoed through the calm. Always. The Dominion commander roared, leaping toward her with a blade of red energy. Lyra raised her hands, a burst of blue light colliding with his attack. The clash of their powers sent lightning cracking across the desert sky. Ethan drove the mech forward, crushing alien soldiers underfoot. He ripped open the ship's side with metal claws. Fire and smoke surrounded them. The commander turned in fury, striking the mech's arm with his blade. Sparks flew. You can't win, human, the commander snarled. Ethan's voice came calm and cold. Watch me. He raised the mech's fist and slammed it down. The commander vanished under a storm of steel and fire. The ship began to crumble, explosions tearing it apart from within. Lyra ran toward the mech, reaching out her glowing hand. We have to go, she shouted. Ethan extended the mech's arm. She climbed onto the shoulder, clutching the metal frame as they turned away. Behind them, the Dominion ship detonated, a sunburst of fire lighting up the desert night. The shockwave rolled across the dunes, scattering sand like waves across the sea. Ethan's mech stood against the wind, the burning wreckage reflected in its glowing eyes. Lyra looked down at him through the cracked window, her voice soft but steady. You destroyed them. Ethan looked up at her, a tired smile on his face. No, he said quietly. I destroyed their cage. She reached out and placed her hand against the glass. Blue light flowing from her skin into the mech. The crack sealed. The old machine hummed stronger, her power and his will merging for a moment. The night sky burned with fading flames, and the human who came for scrap had become a legend whispered by stars. But their fight wasn't over yet, because the Dominion never forgets. The sky above the desert glowed faintly from the burning wreckage behind them. Ethan's mech strode forward, carrying Lyra on its shoulder, her glowing blue eyes reflecting the fires scattered across the dunes. For the first time in days, silence filled the air, but it was uneasy, a pause before the storm. Lyra clutched the mech's armor tightly, her fingers leaving trails of blue light. Where are we going? She asked, her voice soft but determined. Ethan's eyes scanned the horizon. There's a wormhole station beyond the asteroid belt, he said. It can take us anywhere in the galaxy, anywhere we want, as long as we survive getting there. She nodded, trust filling her heart. Her glowing skin flickered faintly as energy swirled inside her, stronger now, freed from the chains and experiments. Behind them, Dominion scouts emerged from the dunes, black ships cutting through the dust. Their engines screamed like beasts of prey. The hunt was far from over. Ethan's hand gripped the mech's controls tighter. We have to move fast, he said. No mistakes, no hesitation. The mech lifted off the sand, huge metallic legs folding as it transformed into partial flight mode. Rockets roared from its back, propelling them toward the jagged cliffs where the asteroid belt began. Energy blasts streaked past them, hitting rocks that exploded in showers of sparks. Lyra's hands glowed brighter, pulses of blue light reaching out from her palms. She touched the cockpit's controls instinctively, and the mech responded faster, dodging the incoming fire. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Never underestimate your passenger," he muttered, smiling faintly. The Dominion fleet pursued relentlessly, their ships sleek and fast, their energy cannons cutting trails through the starlight. One ship fired a concentrated beam, striking the mech's side. Sparks flew, panels cracked, but Ethan held steady. Lyra looked at him, worry shadowing her glowing eyes. "We can't outrun them," she whispered. Ethan's voice was calm, even in chaos. "We won't outrun them, we'll outsmart them." He pressed a sequence on the mech's ancient controls, opening the auxiliary boosters. The ship's energy pulsed, bright blue flames blasting from the engines. They plunged into the asteroid belt, weaving between spinning rocks and molten debris. The Dominion ships struggled to follow, colliding with massive boulders and exploding in bursts of light. Inside the mech, Lyra's energy pulsed stronger, responding to Ethan's commands instinctively. Her glowing veins shimmered across her skin, forming patterns like constellations. Her touch merged with the machine, her power amplifying the engines. "Almost there," Ethan said, pointing toward a small glowing station ahead, its circular opening shimmering with the energy of the wormhole. As they approached, more Dominion ships tried to block their path, but Lyra's pulse flared, a brilliant blue wave of energy sweeping outward, knocking enemy vessels off course. Sparks and debris rained around them. Ethan guided the mech straight through the wormhole's center, blue lights swirling around them like a tunnel of stars. The Dominion ships couldn't follow, the energy field tearing apart anything that tried. Inside the wormhole, silence enveloped them. Only the hum of the mech and the pulse of Lyra's power filling the space. She looked at Ethan. "We made it," she said softly, her voice trembling with relief. Ethan smiled, his armor scratched and blackened. "Not just yet," he said, "but close." When they emerged on the other side, the stars were different, unfamiliar constellations glowing in the night sky. The air was clean, the planet below lush with forests and rivers, untouched by war. Lyra stepped down from the mech, her glowing hands brushing against the grass. Her chains gone, her past horrors behind her. She looked at Ethan, her eyes shining with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "No, you save yourself," he said, his voice quiet. "I just made sure no one stood in your way." She smiled faintly, her glowing form reflecting the sunlight. "In my world, when someone saves your life, your souls become bound." Ethan looked at her, a faint laugh escaping. "Then I guess we're bound for eternity." The mech stood tall behind them, battered but alive, a symbol of human ingenuity and courage. Lyra raised her hands to the sky, blue light flaring outward, a beacon of hope. Far above, the Dominion fleets searched the galaxy, unaware that the girl they sought had escaped, free at last, and that one human had defied an empire to change the fate of worlds. Ethan took a deep breath, looking at Lyra beside him. The weight of the galaxy lifted slightly. "Let's make sure no one ever chains you again," he said. Lyra nodded, her glowing eyes soft. "No one ever will." And as the twin suns rose over the horizon, the human and the alien girl stood together, a new dawn breaking across the galaxy. One human had broken the chains, and a legend of courage, defiance, and hope had been born.